Good afternoon, Maine. Welcome to the Muddy Waters podcast. As always, I'm your host, Chuck Ellis, helping you navigate the muddy waters of Maine politics. And what we do here on the Muddy Waters podcast, as you know, is we help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state and also better understand who their potential candidates are for different offices and things like that by bringing on, we bring on candidates, we bring on experts and, business and different things around the state, whether it's medicine or whatever, to help the people in Maine better understand what's actually going on here in our state. Unfortunately, the mainstream media, as we all know, is not doing its job of informing the people about what's going on, especially when it comes to local politics, which they seem to largely ignore. And so that's why we exist. And so today we are fortunate to have on the podcast with us, we'll call it potential gubernatorial candidate, Jonathan Bush. Thanks for joining us.
Hey man, good to be here, Chuck. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we've met a couple of times, had a number of really great conversations. So I always enjoy the conversation, and obviously with you, the potential that we hear, you're one of the rumored, potential candidates who's yet to throw their ring in the hat, their hat in the ring, I think is I get it backwards. And so, we would love to, get to know the people who are interested and engaged in Maine politics, especially those who are considering, the really difficult and difficult task of running for office, especially on the Republican side, in a state like Maine. So, love to have the opportunity to get to know people. And so, obviously you've got the last name Bush, and we'll probably get into that a little bit more later. But, I'd love to start just by giving you an opportunity to tell us who you are, where you come from, and, kind of what you've been doing for the past 20 or so years. And then we'll move on from there. But yeah, I'd love to hear. I know that you got a couple companies that you've started, and so and family and different things like that. So I'd love to give you an opportunity just to kind of tell us who you are.
All right, Chuck. Well, let's see. I think probably the best way to describe me so far is a disruptive innovator in the world of healthcare. That's where I've been. After got my first couple of jobs in Maine, of course, growing up in Kennebunkport in the summers, and then on North Haven Island. But my first job in healthcare was driving an ambulance in New Orleans, and then I was a combat medic in the Army during the Gulf War, and ended up obsessed with how bloated and inefficient the healthcare system was, and thought about the way EMTs on ambulances and medics in the Army kind of shortcut a lot of the trips to the doctor that the traditional civilian care system requires, and ended up starting a business to try to use that knowledge in maternity care, and actually in helping women have bouncier babies easier by using the midwife model that most of the world uses. Most women have a baby with a midwife at their side, not an OBGYN, and you only have an OBGYN when you are sick and pregnant. You can be sick and not be pregnant. Sorry, you can be sick and not be pregnant, but you can be pregnant and not be sick. You can have a perfectly healthy pregnancy. And of course, the cost of an OBGYN is high, but also when OBGYNs spend all their time with healthy moms, they don't get good at dealing with sick ones. And so we built a model originally called Athena Women's Health, where our patients had much more support in labor and delivery and prenatal care, and much better outcomes. And our specialist OBGYNs were in fact specialists in illness. They were involved only in cases where there was trouble on the horizon, and they were incredibly good at that as a result, much better than the average. So you ended up with very high net promoter score experiences for our patients, for our women, very low cesarean section rates, very low incidence of neonatal intensive care unit, which is, of course, traumatic for babies and unbelievably expensive. You're glad it's there when you need it, but you don't want to overuse it. And the biggest problem we had was figuring out how to deal with all these insurance claims and all the different rules associated with payment and who pays and who's eligible. And so we ended up building a little internet system, basically a screen scraper, to check the state Medicaid site on who was covered and what their copays were and what codes you needed to use to get what claims paid if you used a midwife versus a doctor. And I ended up building a little rules engine that kept track of it so the ladies at the front desk could do it easily and still get home in time for the babysitter kind of thing. And designed it on the McDonald's cash register, simple to use, quickly knows when to prompt you to supersize your order, et cetera. And that kind of intelligence just didn't exist at the front desk of doctors' offices. And so while we weren't able to get everybody in America to switch to midwife care, we were able to get a lot of the doctors in America to switch to an internet-based kind of front door, an internet-based cash register, if you will. And that company went from being called Athena Women's Health to Athena Health, and ended up being an online billing, medical records, patient communication platform that I ended up running it for 21 years. Ran all the operations up in Belfast, Maine, ended up with 1,000 employees in Belfast. They're still there. I guess about 900 of them are still there. I was just in Belfast at the Veterans Hall last week and saw about 100 of them. It was fantastic fun.
Nice.
Very moving to see them all still cranking away there. And the company went from, a bunch of friends in a basement to a bunch of friends having our own office and feeling like big deals that we had a, door with Athena Health on it that was our door, to having the whole building, to having the building next door, to having a campus, to having a public offering. And today, 20% of all visits to the doctor in America happen on the system we built called AthenaNet. And all of the operations, all of the claims out the door, payments in the door, the bill you get in the mail, all of that happens in Belfast, Maine. And finally in I guess it was 2018, the company was bought by an activist investor who kind of launched an attack and said, company needs to make more cash and this kind of thing. So they bumped me out and bumped more than 1,000 people out, and made a lot of money and still doing well. But that allowed me the time to build another company with what I thought was missing from the first. The nice thing about the dog eating your homework is you've got a lot of your thinking done. And so I ended up building a company called Zeus Health. Zeus was the father of Athena. Not that I'm insecure about losing Athena, but I thought that was kind of fun. And what we've done is built essentially the brains of a medical record that doesn't care where you've been. It knows your whole medical record. So if you go to Maine Med or Intermed or up to Bangor or Maine General, your records from all the other places you've been are automatically gathered, assembled, and rationalized into one clean picture so that the doctor doesn't have to start all over with you in a clipboard. And we spend a lot of money. We drive our patients crazy. We've all had that experience of, really, you don't know my blood type or whatever. Yeah. And we duplicate a lot of care. A lot of the cost of care comes from just not knowing the facts about what's gone on before. And I think Zeus will be a game changer in medicine because suddenly, nationally, everyone will have one clean copy of their record that any doctor or urgent care or pharmacy or laboratory can have if they're engaged in your treatment. I've also been on a bunch of other boards. I'm a chairman of a policy think tank in Washington called FreeOp, which is the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity, focused on ways of getting progressive aims accomplished through the free market. Turns out the free market's a good way of helping people. It gets talked down a lot in Washington, which blows me away, and Augusta for that matter. But I do a little of that as well. And then, as you know now, I've started Maine for Keeps, and been working on a policy playbook here in Maine on what we might do differently. I know we just got the latest small business environment ratings across the country. North Carolina was number 1, and we were 43.
And somehow I'm surprised we were that good.
Yeah. U.S. News had us 49th. it depends on your measures, but we're not good. I've had a great run in with the American dream, with Athena and with all these startups that I've helped and with all this stuff I've been telling you about. And it kind of crushes me that American dream experience is just unlikely to be available to people who grew up and stay in Maine. And we all know people did well in school and they wanted to have a crack at the American dream. So they left, and they went to New York or went to wherever they thought they could get economic opportunity. And maybe they make enough money and they come back, or they get pregnant and there's no better place to raise kids and live than Maine. But it's just a tragic that's a trade-off, that you have to pick one or the other. It should be both.
I would actually argue a little bit that when it comes to like raising, there's a lot of things that are positive about raising kids in Maine, like small town community, that kind of thing. But the education system makes it that eats into the positivity of raising kids in Maine, because our education system is similarly ranked very, very low.
Yeah.
In the nation. Yeah. But to go back to your point,
like 43rd, I think we were 39th in the NAAP, reading and math, 4th and 8th grade. The government does a sample, and we're 39th. We were, by the way, number 1 in 1992. So we have been marching backwards steadily for a while now. And I think that connects to this idea of what I call the Maine dream, which is to keep the glory of community and the environment and the neighborhoods of Maine and the family energy of Maine, but to not have to lose the American dream to do it. And I think our schools are absolutely one of 7 major areas that need a turnaround, radical turnaround, if that Maine dream is going to come true.
So you just to kind of talk about some of the talking points that the other side of the aisle has on education these days. Yeah. One is going to come from a school board meeting in Brunswick, and the other is from Pender Macon, who is the head of the Department of Education in Maine. And I'll start with her, which is that we don't need to worry about any of those things. We don't need to worry about test scores. We have good global citizens, as whatever the heck that means.
Yeah.
We have AI. So it actually doesn't matter if kids are able to be proficient in reading, writing, arithmetic, math, and science and history, because we have AI. And then the second thing is this idea and this attitude that's being presented that competition is bad. So a lot of schools are eliminating valedictorian, salutatorian. They're eliminating class rankings because they don't want kids to feel bad about where they are in school.
Yeah. I mean, the second one is so absurd. I sort of feel like the best argument is just to leave it hanging in the air that someone thinks that. That they think that congratulating excellence is a mistake, is a brain hurting idea. Doesn't mean it's universal. It doesn't mean that there aren't relative challenges of each person and that a perfectly wonderful, deserving person can't get it because of whatever. The idea that because of all those myriad reasons that you wouldn't congratulate the accomplishment is just absurd. Like, we have the Medal of Honor. Can you imagine not having the Medal of Honor because one soldier somewhere did a Medal of Honor thing and we didn't have it on record, so we couldn't give it out? What? No, there's symbolism. There's semiotics in it. Let's go back to the first one, which is a little more of a debate. The second one is so absurd. It's like a 1984 George Orwell sort of alternative future bad dream. Large language models build artificial intelligence. They are essentially they are applying math to the finite number of objects that are all the words ever spoken, right? Or all the words at least ever put on the internet. If you want to survive in a world where algorithms are taking words and guessing at the next word and the next word and the next word, you must have logic. You must have the ability to form your own opinions from first principles. If you really care about social justice, You're going to help people think for themselves. And the most essential, the most basic unit of analysis to allow thinking for self is math. It is math is 100%. The most naked, non-judgmental form of logic in the world.
Yeah.
Large language models are made by applying math to words, not values, not opinions, not the zeitgeist. Maine has Augusta has. I don't think Maine does. It's sort of ironic because I think Maine is one of the states least subject in the communities that you kind of visit and live in and work in, least subject to sort of groupthink. And then you get to Augusta, or you watch Augusta through the screens of the current press and social media, and you're like, sort of couldn't be more un-Maine, that idea that the group is thinking this, so I have to think it too, even if it doesn't make sense to me. In a world where groupthink is moving people around like that, math, basic logic skills are critical to survival. In a world where large language models are telling you what to think without actually doing any thinking themselves, just guessing at what word would fit in the model next, the ability to form an opinion yourself, to use first principles, is never been more important. What's not important is what Pender making this social citizenship crap. That stuff is not important because that is whatever the zeitgeist is saying today. There is nothing lasting about that. The zeitgeist is wrong. And the zeitgeist is always wrong. It's not that today's progressives are particularly wrong. In the 70s, the government came out with the food pyramid saying that animal fats were bad and that we should all have more corn syrup. And they proceeded to kill hundreds of millions of Americans by giving them all diabetes. They didn't mean to do it. They didn't say, let's make America obese and give everyone diabetes. They said, maybe fat is the cause of, heart disease. And,
let's be a little best. Let's be a little less generous and say that they were paid off by big cereal companies that wanted to make money by people buying.
I find that when you're choosing between an explanation that is really brilliant treachery and just dumbass shit, it's usually the latter.
I would like to believe it, but the people that keep making these decisions, they seem to very effectively do stuff in such a way that's like, man, if they were doing this on accident, it would be hard to be as effective as they are being. But I hear what you're saying.
Remember, we're tribal creatures. Once the crowd is going a certain way, it's hard to be the one. The first pygmy that said, maybe that's not a lion. Those guys aren't in the gene pool anymore. We gotta. We're tribal, and that's why we need math. That's why we need language skills so that we can stand up to the tribe. And when the tribe says, this, DEI, this, and gender, that, whether it's treachery again or foolishness or groupthink, the ability to calculate and think and assemble evidence, warrant, and claim and decide if the claim is a valid claim is a critical skill. And that if we can't do that, we really can't talk about environmentalism and all these kind of admirable goals, because we won't execute against the admirable goal in a reasonable way. We'll make dumb groupthink decisions, and no one will be able to say, wait a minute, is 4xing the cost of electricity in order to have someone feel good about connecting their wimpy little solar panel to the grid? Is that really environmentalist? If you can't do math and you can't use logic, you can't see the folly, the anti-environmental folly of that environmental gesture.
Yeah.
And so, that's the one you got. That's where Pender scares me to death, is the idea that sort of citizenship as it is subjectively defined today by the groupthink might be more important, as important, even remotely anywhere near the ability to do math and understand how the language works.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting. So I was a math major in college. That's what my degree is in. And then I worked in business, working in banking. So, but math is my thing. It's like, it's always come easy to me. And I remember, I remember being in in school. And I remember like high school math, in particular, my freshman year in high school math. And I was a smarter kid in terms of math. So as a freshman, I was with a bunch of juniors in was it, I think it was algebra 2 or geometry or something like that. I can't exactly remember what it was, but I remember the group of people that I was with, and like there were some kids in there being like the older, not as ahead of things kids who were just like, we're definitely not going to work in a career with mathematics. Why do we need to know this? Like, why is what they would always say. And what I was so disappointed with growing up was that the teachers never had an answer to that question. And like what we've already talked about, mostly you, is that this is actually fundamental to thinking. Math is actually fundamental to logic and reason and problem solving. Like it trains your brain. Yes, when you're dealing with mathematics, sure, you're dealing with a squared plus y. You have these a b c or x y, and you have these variables, and you have to solve for the variables. And yes, in real life, the variables are not, they're not actually as simple as that. But the training that you do to your brain to kind of figure out how to narrow down the variables and how to come to the conclusion of like what actually is going on trains you for the much more complex real life scenarios that you go through. And so I was so disappointed, like as I look back in life, and I was able to, I realized this on my own, that this is actually fundamental to being able to think. And when you talk about like AI actually is, I think everybody knows this. I was in a networking meeting this morning, and everybody was like talking about how they're using AI, not intentionally. They just brought it into their little 1-minute presentations because of how big of a thing it is. And
right. That's where the zeitgeist is going. So suddenly everybody's got to say that.
Well, exactly. But also AI is an incredible tool if you know how to use it. No,
that's right.
I've used AI a number of times, asked it a question, it answered. I was like, no, you're wrong. I sometimes call it stupid. I'm not really worried that it's going to become sentient and try to take me out. But that some people are. Sci-fi AI is not what we're talking about. This is real life AI. But
well, you got to remember, listen, AI, those large language models, the language used to train the model is all the words on the internet. Yeah. Think about what you see on the internet every day. Think about the simplification, the bloated blather. All of that is what those engines are consuming to figure out what to say back to you.
Right.
Of course, all of our human frailty is in that.
Yep.
Of course, no new decisions, no progress, no inventions, nothing that is about what's next for Maine.
Absolutely.
It's an expedient. It's better than filling out forms. There's going to be all kinds of speeding up of the bloat work of life from AI.
100%. Yep.
But if you can't think for yourself in a world where this machine is ripping along next to you, you got real problems. And the idea that we might, as a state, enable kids, literally say it's okay that they can't think basic logic for themselves, it's treachery.
Yeah, it's just absolutely. I think you used the word, not your version of this, but I would say mind bending to hear that people are even thinking that. It's like literally painful to the brain to think that that's where people are.
I mean, I don't know if you made it through the measure what matters study that the consultant did for the state. It's painful. It hurts, physically hurts your fingers to turn the pages. But literally the idea that AI and technology is used as an answer to the inability to do math and read by grownups who are in education, who are held forth as experts, that couldn't be, it's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite. It couldn't be more mind-bendingly, to use now both of our words, absurd.
Yeah. 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 Well, I think it's just a matter of laziness and people who they have other agendas and they're focused on those agendas and they're not doing well. And so instead of being like, oh, we're not doing well, we need to make adjustments and we need to figure out how we can accomplish this and do better. It's just, oh, well, we don't need to. And it's just,
there's a big theme in our politics. We had a discovery about sort of people fail and do bad things for reasons beyond their immediate control. There are influences in their lives, childhood, origin, racism, sexism. You can imagine all the things. And we've kind of now come to grips that that's a real thing that happens. It is an explanation, but it is not an excuse. It does not change what we must therefore do. It does not mean that the Department of Education is not culpable when kids decline in their ability to read and do math. I understand they come from a million places. I understand they have stresses at home. They have forever. So do the children of every other state. There is no explanation. I know AI is there. There is no explanation given that says, oh yeah, it's okay to stink at math worse than every other state because AI, because racism, because social sort of trend of the day. No, those things are real. I acknowledge we all should. Thank God we came to grips with it. Wonderful. Now, what's for dinner? Because we got to study our math tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Because regardless of all those things, it doesn't matter. I won't bring up a great clip from a movie that I've mentioned multiple times in this podcast, but the reality is like what you're doing. By the way, it's Training Day. Just in case if you haven't watched it, enjoy. But the
Denzel one.
Yeah, the Denzel one.
There was two.
Yeah. And so like. Oh no, sorry. Training Day is not the movie. I meant Remember the Titans is actually the movie. Training Day is an incredible movie. But Remember the Titans is the one that has the scene where basically somebody helps out a kid because he feels bad because he gets yelled at. And Denzel basically says, you're not helping him, right? Like we need to actually train kids. So like to go back to the point that you had made, when we had talked earlier about like kids feeling bad, like this relates to the same thing is like, well, okay, there's a lot of challenges. Kids are feeling bad. Okay, great. Is our job to make them feel good in the here and now, or is our job to help prepare them for life?
Better question. What would make them actually feel good? What would make someone feel good? What would manage their anxiety? Enablement of pain?
Sure.
If your child is addicted, or your child has got a bad case of anxiety, and you go to the most expensive, fanciest live-in resort psychiatry compound to help them, and you've got unlimited money, what do you think they say to you? Do they say enable them? Do they say, yeah, give them a little money and let them get another bump? Do they say, yeah, tell them it's not their fault? Is that what you think? If every Mainer had unlimited resources to get the best help they could, would any expert one-on-one in private tell them, enable this? Allow it to justify not trying? No.
Not if they're really an expert. There's some corruption in this world, but people who
when you're not the when you're not the best help,
right?
When you're not the smartest expert, and when you don't care about the child, you might say, oh well, it's not their fault, and it's too hard, and
give them this medication and they'll feel better. But that's not long-term growth and good. Right? It's insulting to your point too. It's not believing in the
you
kids.
ameliorate symptoms without getting at the root cause ever in anything. You just have worse symptoms as soon as you stop ameliorating. If you get to the root cause, first of all, there's the joy of discovery. Aha, I feel it. Oh, Jesus, that's what it is. And then every time you get a little step on it, every time you get a little edge on it and make a little progress, the confidence, the dopamine that you get from you don't get dopamine from someone telling you it's not your fault. No dopamine comes from somebody telling you it's not your fault. Even if it's not your fault, it doesn't matter. That's not where you get the dopamine. You get it from figuring it out yourself and then figuring out what to do about it and then starting to do things. And if
I was just going to say, it's similar to like if you're trying to get healthy, right? And you're overweight, one of the most effective things that you can do is not focus necessarily just on the fat, right? It's to build muscle, right? Building muscle, the muscle eats the fat. So when you're dealing with a kid who feels bad about himself, they're basically emotionally overweight. And what you need to do is work on building muscle, and then their muscle eats the fat. Same idea is like you make them feel confident, and that gives them the emotional fortitude to be able to handle other people saying bad things about them, or them even the bad thoughts that come into their own minds are like, yeah, but I did this, right? You
You
give
bet.
them, you help them accomplish things, really accomplish things on their own by actually holding them accountable, holding them to standards, and telling them, by high standards is telling the kids that you believe in them, right?
That's right.
And that's what we're not doing
I
in our
think
society
all
today.
human
Yeah.
progress comes from love and work. Love
Yeah.
something larger than yourself and do work. Feel the progress of chipping away at a problem. Those two things explain everything. And every time someone in a position of power says something to the contrary, they are cheating.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, I love it. We didn't even like necessarily intend to get into there, but we got into education, which I think is
Yeah, we're
like
going deep.
obviously
Is this how all your things go, man?
we try. Like it's about
All
having a
right.
real conversation. You know, it's the
I'm
I
having to
sometimes
resort to, to dark chocolate to keep up with you.
um but yeah, we like to do like we'll call it the Joe Rogan style, but not nearly as long, because I don't think I could handle a 3 hour 3.5 hour. This guy, he goes, but like it's about having a real conversation so people can really get a sense, and we can dive deep. That's one of the other problems with the way that the media exists today, is that like you get these short snippets of, and rather than like fully being
Sure.
informing people. And so that's
Yeah.
that's what we like to do. So obviously, in potential, gubernatorial, if you're running, I think you said that you're in an exploratory phase,
Right. I'm
trying to figure out,
exploring it. I'm
yeah,
exploring it.
exploring it. So I mean, outside of education, because we already dealt with that, and what are the issues? You've hinted at a few, and I want to hear.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we can get into some of those. What are the issues that you say are the primary issues that are facing our state, and then what are we doing wrong, and then what do we need to be doing in order to right the ship?
Yeah.
Here in
Good.
Maine.
All right. Well, this is the way I see it. For me, the North Star is this thing I call the Maine dream, which is the ability to pair the joy of being in Maine, raising a family in Maine, living in Maine, having Maine neighbors, having Maine waters and streams around you, with the American dream, without having to leave Maine to do the American dream. That's, to me, the North Star. And if you break it down, what is in the way of that Maine dream today? Well, you pointed out one thing, which is if your kid goes to school in Maine, they're going to do worse than they should, worse than they used to. And the government's going to say that it's okay, which is like the most offensive thing I can imagine. Right. But there's also the fact that we have a really, really, really oppressive business environment, like among the worst in the country, like surprisingly bad. On my podcast, Maine for Keeps, I interviewed Luke Holden of Luke's Lobsters, one of the guests. This is a guy who's a Maine legend, and he had to wait 8 years before he had the patience and the resolve to open a location in Maine. He said it was harder to get a permit to do a restaurant in Portland than in San Francisco and New York. When Portland's only got 68,000 people, Portland should be like, here, I'll fill it out for you. Let me help you. Let me make it as easy as possible. And instead, they sort of look down their nose at somebody who's engaged in, filthy commerce as if they should be suspected of something. And that idea of making the zeitgeist, the culture of someone engaged in commerce is a suspect, is a crazy, toxic, life-defeating culture. And our entire regulatory code reads that way. It doesn't mean that we should sort of be a strip mining state. We don't want to be other states. We love our environment. We can have strict rules, but we ought to be clear about them. We ought to delegate the authority to review them, trust people to, trust and verify. We'll get to the Bush quotes later. But not sort of look down our nose at somebody who wants to start something, build something differently, build 10 houses at the same time instead of the cost of building each one separately. These are great ideas, and we should be like, hey, man, go you. Let me see if I can help. So business environment, obviously our electrical bills are absurd. I wouldn't normally put them at the top line. I'd be like, yeah, we should work on it. But Maine, it's shocking. And what's more shocking is the specific and active work of the government to make them worse.
Yep.
I don't think it's, look, we're in the corner of the country. We don't have any gas mines. There's plenty of reasons why we might not have the cheapest, But the idea of requiring the power company to buy electricity at 4 times the wholesale rate, the idea of not counting hydroelectric energy as renewable energy, but requiring 50% of our energy to be renewable. Like, these are, again, sort of like George Orwellian crazy. Like, how did that happen? Who thought that was okay? That hydroelectric energy over 100 megawatts doesn't count as renewable. What is that? I mean, it's like, you wouldn't, if I said that to you on the street, you're like, nah, man, he's a nut. Like, that doesn't make any sense. No one would do that. So I think electricity, I think housing in general, the entire supply chain around our housing stock is really sclerotic. It's really busted up. And the ability to get all the ducks you need in a row to be able to build is really, really, really hard to come by. And as a result, you got other problems. It's hard to get people into the trades. It's hard to get people to want to do construction and general contracting because you're so hung up. You're so stuck and dependent on other people that you can't soar. So a lot of our most talented people avoid those highly regulated industry sectors, and we don't have enough supply. And then we say, oh, let's have a committee to. So in Maine now, affordable housing is how to divide up the 9 houses left in Maine as opposed to go make 90 more. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That again. Go ahead.
Speaking of affordable housing, I like to highlight this, and because like when the Democrats talk about affordable housing, they talk about government funded housing that people get to live in. And it's right when conservatives, we are interested in affordable housing. But it's that Maine dream or the American dream. We want you to own a home. We want you to own your condo. We want you to build equity for yourself. We want you to have. We want to empower you. So I want to highlight that.
Affordable. Affordable doesn't mean someone gave you the money for it. It means it was affordable. The Affordable Care Act does not make care more affordable at all. In fact, it is behind the creation of numerous vertical monopolies around hospitals across the country. It actually made care less affordable, but it brought in a lot of tax dollars and subsidized a lot of people. So it feels affordable, even though it's more expensive. The housing thing is the same thing. Affordable doesn't mean somebody gave you the money for it. It means that it's affordable, that it's less expensive per square foot. We need to be on that axis. There's only so much money. What did Maggie Thatcher say? Socialism great until you run out of other people's money to take. Like, there's not enough to go around if you just keep dividing and dividing and dividing the same housing stock different ways. We need more housing stock. Affordable, the word affordable housing should mean that a house was affordable to build. And we don't think of it that way. It's literally not, it's, the problem with the French is they have no word for entrepreneurship. We have a word problem. We think the word affordable means I got the money from someone else. It doesn't mean that it's affordable. So that's another big area. And then we've got a huge criminal justice problem. We have low crime rate, so I think that's great. But the money we spend to deliver policing services and the insults we inflict on our law enforcement, particularly in Southern Maine, is a real problem. I also include our family services in that. I think that the family services sector is so overpromised that they have such a large landscape and that they could never actually do a good job at it. And so there's this kind of code of not talking about what's not going right, and kids dying at really like 15, 20 kids a year in that. I mean, that's heart-rending.
I think the number that I keep hearing is somewhere around 148 children have died. Bill Diamond, who's kind of leading the charge on this, he's former senator. He will make it clear that this has been a problem under all of the governors since he's been involved in Maine politics, but like specifically under the Mills administration, 148 children have died. And they produced their study, and the person who was in charge of the department resigned. And the person who had been the number 2 had been in part of the organization for 30 years, was the one who was promoted to take over, like obviously clearly not fixing the problem. And
there's problems outside of them. I mean, the scope of work that they've been given is impossible to do. And so, that agency also has to inspect every single nursery. Like, every nursery school in the state must keep paper records of a sign-in and sign-out sheet for all the teachers and all the kids, and then have them inspected by a state worker twice a year. What? They're doing that while these kids are dying over here? Like, stop the clipboards.
Yeah.
Every time a kid goes to a nursery school today, any kid in any place, and says, "Daddy or mommy, mommy spanked me when I wouldn't take off my unicorn suit before school," the teacher is required to report that to the DSS, and the DSS is required to investigate it. How many undone investigations of "mommy spanked me," could there possibly be? Thousands. And meanwhile, they're not focusing where they're desperately needed. There are examples of this. As I've done Maine for Keeps, I've come up with more. I call it the wall of shame. There are more examples of just crazy scope creep of our bureaucracy by our state legislature. Oh, they should do that, and they should do that, and they should do that. And then the bureaucrat gets it, and they're going, how are we going to do this? The cops, every single town and city has its own separate police record keeping system. They don't talk to each other. So you could do a crime in Freeport, and the cop could look up your license in Portland and not see the crime. And meanwhile, both cities pay for totally separate tech stacks, service centers, equipment, like duplicate. In a state of only 1.3 million people, we should have one, maybe two, and they should talk to each other. There's example after example. And if you're trying to build the Maine dream, if you're trying to build business, you need your tax dollars, to not be embarrassingly large. 7% is a really high number, one of the highest in the country. But the only way you're going to, and the property taxes also, it's not like it's either or. Maine is both. You can't waste money like that. You can't duplicate money like that. Nobody wants to put a business in a place that is so unfrugal, so not rational with their money. Right. So that's another area where I think there's a lot that could be done in Maine quickly, easily. Wouldn't hurt anybody, wouldn't gore any oxes to get onto a single system or a small number of systems and make those systems talk to each other.
So it's interesting. So you've mentioned a couple of times. So I think you talked a little bit about this, what you did with, is it Zeus Health, which did a similar thing?
Same thing.
It's a similar
concept. I know how to do this.
So you have a little bit of experience in that. So
yeah.
I do think that when you start talking that direction internally, I'm like, I don't trust the government. And I kind of like that the government can't talk to itself to a degree, because
the government gets so big, you kind of want it to suck.
Well,
what if you narrowed the scope and then didn't suck at what's left? I think you need both. You need a narrower, fewer laws, better administered. Right? You can't say that we're bad at arresting criminals. We just got to have there be fewer laws that make you a criminal, and then the crime that's a crime is a crime, and you get arrested. And when you change towns, we still know.
Well, and I think the bigger problem, I actually had a long conversation with a really good friend of mine who's in law enforcement, is that crimes aren't really prosecuted in Maine at the moment.
Unbelievable.
This is
another example. They're so in Maine. If you are caught, let me tell you a story. My wife has to go to the lab a couple days a week for a health thing. She has a guy meet her right before the lab opens so she can get through quickly. She gets there 6 a.m. or whatever it is from her. She goes to her yoga class, and then she goes in, and the door is ajar at the lab. So she says, "Oh, my guy must be in." She goes in, pulls the door open. There is a gentleman with his pants down, cooking a rock and sucking some drug into a syringe in order to inject himself. He's got his shopping cart and all kinds of junk around him. My wife, yikes, runs back to the car, locks the car, calls 911. 5 minutes later, the police arrive. Then her lab tech arrives. She goes in, gets her daily blood test. When she comes out, the policemen are leaving without the guy. She says, "Hey, what happened?" And the police say, "Oh, we couldn't arrest him. He identified as homeless." And so they caught him. My wife, he broke the door of the lab open and started a crack house for himself in the lab,
medical facility.
medical facility. And, I don't know what the damage, how much does it cost to fix a broken, glass door on the front of and the police can't arrest him. And it gets worse when they do arrest someone. All the person has to do is identify as, if they get past the homeless loophole, the next loophole is, I have a health problem. You have to take me to the hospital. You go to the hospital, it's a 12-hour wait at the hospital to get through the emergency room. Hospital doesn't have any infrastructure to keep track of that person and let them know. Police doesn't have enough policemen to sit for 12 hours with somebody who may or may not be faking this medical problem, because it's now on the street that if you do this, you're basically going to literally get out of jail free. The Cumberland County Jail, I don't know all the jails, is rejecting 35% of arrests. They're not even getting arrested. And this is, what an insult to this poor guy who needs 4 hots and a cot, 3 hots and a cot, more than anyone, to get at least a little time sober and safe and dry and clean. They get wiped out. And imagine the cop. Oh, Jesus, I've just done this. And I'm just going to I finally got someone. I'm going to let him go, or I'm going to send him to the hospital, and then they're just going to disappear out the back door laughing at me. That is so soul killing. And, there's 30% vacancy in the Portland Police Department today, 30 open positions. And the pay's great. The equipment's amazing. They've all got grant money paying for all the latest stuff. But the demoralization of not enforcing the law. And again, Maine dream, you want to have the American dream in Maine, you got to have businesses be willing to be in Maine. If there's going to be no enforcement of property law, why are you going to invest in property? It's simple. It's the broken windows theory from Bill Bratton in New York in the 80s. It's a real thing. You got to enforce the law. You don't have to be mean about it. I'm not saying that there aren't painful stories behind the lives of the people who break the crimes. And I'm not saying that, in fact, I feel strongly that a well-run jail is a great place for someone to go. If I was ever to run for governor and ever to be elected, I'd spend the night in jail once a week just to make sure they were great places to go. Make sure they were safe, non-judgmental, reliable places so people could begin to dry out and get on a new path. But if you don't enforce the law at all, the toxicity, it spreads to the cops. It spreads to the hospital, who's got people coming through their emergency room just to get out the other door. It spreads to the county, prison staff. It's embarrassing to everyone. It's soul killing. And we're absolutely doing it, passing laws to enable it. What's our new law? We're a sanctuary state, so the police can now not cooperate with federal agents either. Can you imagine how insulting that is to a police officer?
I don't know that we even have the right. I think that's going to get challenged. It's got to get challenged to the Supreme Court. Like, there's no way that we actually can do that. It's against the this actually is a federal issue.
Of course. But the idea that the group in Augusta thinks that that's a topic, that's the kind of thing that, when you say I'm considering, that makes me really consider getting into politics. Like, there's no way that most Mainers think that makes sense. There's no way that therapists in mass, good therapists taking care of people, homeless people, addicted people, people with criminal insanity, nobody thinks those are good ideas. Nobody who's really thought about it for even a minute. And yet there it is in our, in the freaking Portland Press Herald as a normal idea.
Well, yeah, there's so many things that are going on in our society, and the one element. So obviously, when you're dealing with a lot of these like drug addicts and the homeless, there's a lot of mental health stuff going on. And you say we want people to actually be able to get help, right?
Yeah.
And like I'm all about personally, like, autonomy, right? If you want to make poor decisions with your life, you have to live with those decisions, and you shouldn't have your right to live how you want to live taken away from you.
To protect people's right to do dumb stuff.
I
love my dumb stuff.
Unless you're violating other people's rights and their safety, and you're staying on their property, and that's when it's like, okay, you've violated other people's rights, you've broke something, you're doing drugs, pants are down in a facility, and
Oh,
like you've now lost your right, at least for a period of time, and you should be forced to go into a facility to get help. Like that's like, it's instead of sending you to jail, because jail's not going to help you, we send you to a facility. But
I
like
don't.
whether it's
I'm on the record
mental
saying
health,
I don't think jail hurts you either. I think that a
right?
safe place where there's no drugs. And by the way, we could have meditation in jail. We could have religion in jail. We could have all kinds of things available to people. As a safe, reliable, warm, always open place for people who end up upside down is not bad from a mental health perspective either.
I'm also okay with jail being a little less comfortable, personally.
I never understood the TV. What do you mean TV? No TV.
Yeah, no, nobody needs a TV. Yeah,
Health
they
and
should.
support and safety and non-judgment. Everybody's story is it's complicated one, and everybody comes at their challenges from different legitimate paths through different legitimate paths, but it doesn't change the need for basic boundaries. All relationships between people who love each other, and the relationships that make up a society need basic boundaries. And I agree with you. If you want to have good boundaries, don't put your finger in other people's junk. Focus on just those negative rights as you describe them.
Yeah. So, looking at a couple of these issues, so I want to get into some other stuff. I don't know how much time you have, but
I've only got a couple more minutes. I thought we would end at 5, but I'm really enjoying. Why don't we take 5 more minutes?
All right, 5 more minutes. Let's see real quick. We got somebody's just one of my friends from the Twitterverse, we'll call it, is watching. Cool. Good to see you, David. So one of the things that there are a couple of things that I kind of want to get into, but we'll go with this because I think it's something that a lot of people will have questions about. So obviously, I kind of hinted at, and you probably hinted at a little bit, the last name Bush. I think you might have quoted some of your family members. So I feel like when I hear the name Bush around a candidate, in Maine, where I would say like maybe half of Maine Republicans will say, we'll just use some fun numbers. Half of Maine Republicans look back on both of the Bushes fondly. But the other half are a little bit less fond of the forever wars and things like that. So running as going into politics with the last name Bush, and obviously we know the other side of the aisle just has pure vitriol for any Republican. So running with the last name Bush, I feel like you've got a little bit to overcome, and maybe on the one hand, you got some people who definitely would want to support you, and others, but also like I think there's a piece to this question that has to do with the fact that, okay, like, you started your own business, but obviously you had tons of help because of your family, right? And so like, I don't know if those are kind of two separate questions, but I'll kind of like what's how do you overcome, I think, the potential negativity that's associated with
let's make it two. Let's start with let's check my privilege, as they say at the Portland City. Check your privilege. Because I certainly had a lot of privilege. And then we'll go into sort of, where do I fit in, Bush doctrine on privilege. Like, one of the reasons why I'm considering running for a job that pays $70,000 a year is because I've had a privilege. I've had a really good run in with the American dream. I've got another company that's doing very well. I've ticked every box on every bucket list I've ever had. I've returned billions of dollars to shareholders. I've created thousands of jobs. I mean, and not just jobs, but careers. In Maine, those 1,000 jobs in Belfast, those people were not unemployed, but they were working by the hour. And then they had benefits and promotion, and they're putting money away, and they're owning their house, and they're putting their kids to college. It's a different thing. So I think everybody is unbelievably lucky compared to somebody else, and unbelievably screwed compared to yet another person. And wherever you are in the food chain of privilege, your job is to make sure you used it, whatever it is. You're born and your dad gives you his boat. Do better than he did, right? You're born into a house, improve the house. If you're born into a business, improve the business. If you're born into America, I mean, remember the 1 percentile back in 2000. I don't know what it is today. The top percent earner in the world was making $30,000 a year. In America, that's poor. That's but poor. So just all of us being in this country, wherever you are, there's somebody way worse off. And there's obviously somebody, when I'd pull up in the Athena jet, to some meeting, there'd be some bigger jet, that made the Athena jet look like shit. So what I've tried to do with my privilege is put it to work for people, make it help people. And at first that meant building a business and, 6,000 really great careers around the country and a radical change to the amount of time doctors spent doing shit work they hated and stunk at, and change that into taking care of people. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of examples, for example, of doctors who weren't taking Medicaid because the payments were too low and the cost of getting paid was so high. But when they got onto Athena, it was worth it. They could figure out a way to justify it. So that's the answer to the first one. Had a lot of privilege, tried to use it to make the world a better place. And the next chapter that I'm exploring is maybe that means make the American dream more accessible, easier for more people to enjoy than just, the privileged crowd. As for the Bush family, I've gone native on their character. I love the soulful, genuine, honorable, honest, humble energy of those Walker Point Bushes. I just love them all. I think they're really good people. And if you don't like that, or if you don't agree with me, Afangul. I just think they're really good people. Now, I went out and started a business in my basement in healthcare. So I was about as far away from, the oil business or the professional baseball business, or certainly politics, as you could imagine. And I did that on purpose. I felt like I needed to make my own way, make my own decisions, not get drawn into the groupthink. The only thing I did politically was when my uncle got us into, I think rightfully so, Operation Desert Storm, where he had a plan to get us. He had a goal, he had a plan, and he had a plan to get out. And he did. He hit that goal. And then when he did it, he got back out. And I never left. I was all there suited up as a combat medic. I thought the war would be longer than the amount of time it took to do boot camp and AIT, but it didn't. It was over.
Yeah.
I don't know whether those neocons around my cousin, I don't know what motivated them, what theory they were working on. I don't think anybody was lying when they thought that, Saddam Hussein had more than he did or whatever. I'm focused on Maine, which is an economic, criminal justice, education problem set. So I'm not really qualified to, or interested in really at this stage of my life, getting into what refinements to Powell doctrine, are needed. But what I know for sure, I know it to the core of my being, is that those Bushes in Kennebunkport are world-class souls and world-class characters. And I aspire to that kind of soul and character, even if I come from a different economic, political, military story than they do.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think one of the things that's true about you, and I know you got to get running, so we'll wrap up real quick, but is that, you, despite coming from this, you did, as you said, you built a business out of your basement. Did you have benefits along the way that put you in a place where you could, do that? Sure. But you still built a business on your own, and it's a number of very innovative businesses. So I think that you're your own person. I definitely don't get the sense that I think this is that just because you have the last name Bush that you're exactly like the others, and I think that not that there's anything. I mean, I don't know any of the Bushes, and I do even think that if there was stuff that happened under George W., I think it had more to do with other people around him than him himself personally. But either way, I felt like that's a question that a lot of people are interested in.
Hindsight's always 2020.
Absolutely.
Oh God, but we didn't know what we know now then. So I don't think we could find a single president where you're like, poor guy, if he had known, now what he knew then, what would he have done? But anyway, listen, man, I love this podcast, Chuck. You're good at this. This is fun.
Thanks. Yeah,
I
it's
hope
been a
I
great
get to
time.
come back on. We'll have to watch the Nielsen ratings and see how your show did to see if I can earn a spot later on as things become clearer for me.
All right. Well, sounds good. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for, even considering running for governor. We definitely need a conservative. I would say that we've got a number of people who I think are great candidates. And considering
I do too, by the way.
I
I think it's worth pointing out. I think we've got, one part of my consideration is I really like the people running. I think they're great.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it'll be interesting to see who ends up being the person on the right. But I'm hopeful that whoever that ends up being is somebody that we can all unify around and push back against the radical left who's trying to unintentionally having the effect of destroying this great state. So thank you again, and we'll hope to have you back on in the future. Have a great night, and again, good luck as you kind of navigate, what direction the wind is going to blow here.
Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it, man. Right. Take care.
Right. Thanks so much. See you. All right. And thank you, everybody at home. We'll just go ahead and close things out. But if you are still watching, one of the things that you can do to help support the Muddy Waters podcast is you can go to muddywaters.us to learn more. Well, not to learn more, but to see all of our previous podcasts and also to learn about we have the Muddy Waters shop where you can buy some of our branded content as well as just fun stuff to support the podcast. My brain has just gone off. But anyway, feel free to check out what we have to offer. We've got nice, cute little mugs. We've got t-shirts. We've got hats, and things that you can buy to help support the podcast. We also, but the Cumberland County Republican Committee has a couple of events coming up that I encourage you to check out. Go to ccrcme.com. One event coming up next week is called Justice in Jazz, and it's focused on protecting girls' sports and spaces, as well as protecting free speech, because they've tried to cancel this event, and we need to show up to support our speakers, which include Representative Laurel Libby, fresh off of her victory, in restoring the rights of her voters and her ability to speak and vote on their behalf. And also a number of victories that we've had in school boards and restoring Title IX as it is mandated by the federal government. So come check us out, Justice in Jazz, July 15th from 5:30 to 8:30 at the Orion Performing Arts Center in Topsom. Suggested donation of at least $10. We'd love to see you there. And then there's another event called the Songo River Sip and Savor, which is going to happen toward the end of the month, or at the end of the month, the very last day, July 31st, on the Songo River, Queen. So we'd love to see you there. Go ahead and check that out on the Cumberland County Republican Committee website, ccrcme.com. To learn more. So thank you all. And we will see you back here sometime next week. Thank you all for watching.